It was the beginning of December when I received a phone call from my father in Orange, California. He explained to me that my grandmother had a heart attack and that she was in the hospital. After the phone call, I packed a few days' worth of clothing and started the 6-hour trip to California. Upon my arrival at St. Joseph's Hospital, I checked in and visited my grandma Sally. She seemed to be doing okay, but had to stay in the hospital for testing and for shortness of breath. I stayed with her that whole weekend, then had to make the trip back to go to work. I did this for 3 weeks. Each week I visited her, she began to look worse and her breathing was getting shorter. The last week of her life, I can recall the doctor letting us know that she had cancer and her lungs were hardening, unable to take breaths. After weeping for some time, we lied to her and told her she would be fine and be out in time for Christmas. That last weekend, I can clearly remember being in the room with her and noticed her staring at a chair, but at the time, I did not think anything of it. She would ask me to stay with her because she was so scared. I asked her why she was so scared, and she explained to me in Spanish that there was a guy in black in the chair, sitting by her feet, sticking his big tongue out at her and throwing spider webs at her. I could tell she was scared. That evening, I grabbed her holy water from home and bought some saints for her room. It was a very uncomfortable feeling when I would go into that hospital room, seeing my grandmother focusing on that chair. I eventually had her moved to a room in front of the nurse's desk. The following morning, they transferred her out to a hospice where she died 2 days later. My dad says she would tell him she could hear singing right before she died. First off, I'd like to say that I really appreciate your site. So far, I've found a lot of interesting things to read and learn. It's great to read other people's tales of true hauntings, because in a way, it's like sharing war stories with other veterans. These tales, if nothing else, really make a person think. I've always religiously believed in the supernatural. Too many strange and bizarre things have happened in my life for me not to. These are just two of the more interesting ones that I hope you and other readers will find mystifying and enjoyable. During the summer of 1995, I lived in Washington, D.C., where my father had rented an apartment suite at the Watergate. It was a very nice apartment, right across from the Kennedy Center on one side and a hop and a skip away from Georgetown on the other, and since the apartment was at ground level, had a nice fenced-in patio area just several yards away from the main pool. I was working as a White House intern and was just enjoying the first real summer away from parental guidance. After a time, however, I came to realize that I really wasn't as alone as I had thought. Upstairs were 2 bedrooms, the master and a smaller one right across the landing. At first, I decided to take the master because after all, bigger is supposed to be better. But I quickly changed my mind because, in the dead of night, I'd feel suddenly very cold and very uneasy, as if someone was standing near my bed, its dark, shadowy presence vaguely menacing. I didn't know who or what it was. All I really knew was that it was big, male, and didn't seem to like me as much as a roomie. After 2 nights of this, and getting very little rest, I moved my stuff across the landing to the other bedroom. Anyway, about this time, my roommate and best friend from college came to visit for a while and, without telling her of my own unsettling experiences, offered her the master bedroom. The very next day, she reported the same unnerving sensations. She told me that during the night, she felt someone breathing cool air on her cheek and felt a heaviness on her chest that both scared and kept her awake all night. After that, she promptly moved her things into my room as well. Since I knew what she was talking about, I graciously gave in, and the 2 of us were very careful to never enter that room unless we absolutely had to and only in broad daylight. Summer came to an end, and we both got ready to head back to college. As I was in the bedroom packing, I suddenly heard her calling my name from across the landing. At first, I was puzzled because it was unspoken between us that we would never enter that room, and since we didn't have anything in there to pack, I hesitated before answering. Finally, I crossed the landing and entered into the master bedroom, calling out, "Yeah, what do you need?" When I walked in the room, nobody was there. Chilled by the episode, I went downstairs, calling my roommate's name. I finally found her in the kitchen area, the furthest part away in the house from the master bedroom. When I told her what happened, she shook her head in bewilderment and told me that she hadn't called my name and was, in fact, inside the pantry room packing up some canned goods. When she told me that, my back stiffened and an eerie shiver ran down my spine. Needless to say, we got the heck out of Dodge. An interesting postscript to this tale came near the end of 1998. My mother had been diagnosed with liver cancer in May, and in a desperate bid to lengthen her life, she had decided to become a Buddhist nun. She dressed in the traditional nun's garb and shaved her head, but at the end of September, she passed away, unfortunately. During this time, a close friend of hers was in DC, and so stayed at the Watergate apartment. She had not seen my mother in over a year, and in fact, did not even know that my mother had just died less than a week ago. She unpacked and fell asleep in the master bedroom. Around midnight, she awoke because, as she told my father later on, she felt and saw an enormous shadow sitting on her chest, cutting off her breath. She couldn't scream because of the weight, and for a second, thought she was dying. She struggled and fought, but the shadow wouldn't budge, and she finally drew in one breath and cried out for help. Immediately, she said she was blinded by a light coming from the closet door, and as the light drew closer and nearer to the bed, she felt the weight suddenly dissipate, the shadow fleeing from the unearthly glow. She opened her eyes and saw a woman standing next to her, brown robes flowing to the ground. Instantly, she said she knew it was my mother, but the only thing that made her wonder was the fact that this woman, this friend she had known for years, was shaved bald. The glowing woman then smiled gently at her and slowly disappeared. Only after this friend of my mother's had told my father about this incident did she learn that, indeed, the day my mother died, she had died with a clean-shaven head, dressed in brown robes. The second place I experienced a haunting was when I lived in a 2-story house on the south side of Las Vegas. The house was owned by a chief in one of the casinos near the Strip and was completely furnished as advertised. As I came from a traditional Asian household, my grandmother also lived with me and my father, and since he was frequently away on business, it was just the two of us there most of the time. The first week we moved in, my grandmother discovered very fine, very black sand would accumulate near the tiled fireplace, and since we didn't ever use the fireplace, we thought it was rather strange. She would sweep it up, throw it away, but the next day it would appear again. This happened for about 4 days in a row. My grandmother, bless her heart, is a Capricorn, and thus rather anal about things. She was forever checking doors and windows, making sure they were locked and secured whenever we left the house. So when we came home one day from shopping, we were shocked to see the front door standing wide open. We always came through the garage door, so it was very unsettling to see the door open, knowing we had locked it before leaving. And since the front entrance is protected on one side by the garage, we knew the wind could not have done this. Nothing had been stolen or otherwise disturbed. We ended up not talking about it because really, what was there to talk about? And put it down to a freak of nature. During this time, my father came home from his trip and stayed in the master bedroom. Now, my father is not a man that is given to sudden wild and unexplained imaginings. He's 6'2", weighs nearly 200 pounds, and is perhaps one of the most self-assured men I have ever known. But after a week in that room, he abruptly confessed to me one day that there was something else staying in that bedroom with him. He said that whenever he closed his eyes to sleep, he would feel as if someone or something was staring at him through the darkness, and he would then have to get up and sleep with the lights on. At first, I just thought that was ridiculous. I mean, the man had faced down a robber at gunpoint, and he had to sleep with the light on? I smiled and nodded, but didn't think much of it because this was Vegas. Not some creepy little Stephen King town filled with outlaw boogeyman. But after he left again, and I decided to stay in the master bedroom, it had cable, I quickly changed my mind, because as I snapped off the light, I too felt something peering at me through the shadows. It wasn't the same as it was in DC. This one was just as unsettling, to be sure, but it wasn't as menacing, just very disturbing. It was almost like it wanted me to notice it, had something it wanted to tell me, and as I turned on the light, I couldn't help but feel that it also needed to do something. Finally, one night, I sat up in bed and asked it, "Okay, what do you want?" I've had some prior experience with channeling, and this wasn't the first time I had encountered a restless spirit, so I just bluntly asked it what it wanted of me so I could finally get a decent night's sleep. When I closed my eyes in exhausted semi-consciousness, it was around 3 a.m. at this time, I saw behind my closed eyelids the pale figure of a woman dressed in white with long brown hair down her back. To be honest, I didn't really believe what I was seeing, just thought it was a product of first stage REM cycle. I don't really remember what she looked like, just that she was slender and had curious stains on her white dress. She looked to be in her late 20s to mid 30s. She told me that she had been taken out to the desert, raped, strangled, and buried in the sand where the present house stood. Again, I don't know how much of this is true because I was nearly asleep at the time, but what I can say with certainty was that this spirit was obviously distressed by the manner of her demise, and I felt very sad for her. Later on, I told my grandmother about this, and as she burned paper money for my mother, a traditional act in Asian countries, she would be sure to burn some for the woman in white as well. She would burn the paper money and plead at the same time for this nice lady to not come out and frighten her while she was alone in the house. I thought it was highly amusing at the time and just indulged her whimsical actions. To me, it had been a very vivid dream, and as I was not the owner of the house, I certainly couldn't come up and dig around the property to substantiate the ghostly claims. After 6 months, the owner of the house was ready to move back in with his family, and so me and my grandmother packed up and moved to the west side. Another 3 months passed before I got a call. It was the owner of the house, and he had a very strange story to tell me. First off, he asked me if when I had lived there, did anything weird happen while I was there? Honestly, I did tell him yes, then told him about what I experienced and concluded that I thought the house was haunted. He agreed, telling me that the doors had started to open by themselves and that he would hear strange noises at night. Finally, he asked me to speak to his girlfriend because she had a most peculiar dream last night and needed to tell me about it. When she got on the phone, she told me that last night she had dreamed she had walked downstairs to the garage and met a young black-haired woman dressed in a white dress. The woman asked her if I was there because she needed to speak to me. Puzzled, the owner's girlfriend said that sorry, but no, they moved away. The woman in white had gotten agitated at the response and then asked, "Well, is the grandmother there then?" Again, she replied no, she's gone too. At this point, the woman in white became exceedingly upset and started to shout, "But I know she's there. I know, and I need to speak to her now. Please, you've got to let me talk to her." The owner's girlfriend was shocked at the desperation in the other woman's voice and kept repeating, "Sorry, but they're not here." Finally, she woke up, sweat pouring down her face, and immediately asked the owner to contact me. I really wish that I could tell you that there's a proper ending to all of this, but since I never went back to the house, nor my grandmother, I don't know what happened in the end. I just thought it was thoroughly bizarre that something which I had convinced myself was just a dream was actually probably based in some reality. Perhaps one day, I'll get the courage to go back there and tell him what the woman in white had told me. I still think about the poor woman at times, wondering if she's still on her quest to find some sort of justice or peace, and I hope that time really will heal all wounds. I just know that I've been blessed in the sense that I've been given opportunities to touch a world seldom seen by rational people, and hopefully this will not be a trend that will soon break. I also wish that I could include father's incidents that have raised my eyebrows a notch or two, but I think that I've taken up enough of your time. Thank you for listening. Oh, and by the way, my grandmother still burns paper money for the lady in white. She's convinced the poor soul will come after her if she doesn't. I was reading through your website, and it gave me the confidence to speak out about what I saw as a child. At age 12, I saw the angel of death, or what have you. I witnessed him come to a woman whom I had no knowledge of or have ever spoken with, take her away by giving her direct eye contact. Here's what happened. It was before summer in 1989. My family was poor, and we were being evicted from an apartment in Washington, D.C. We had to go to court to talk about it with the judge. In the waiting room at the courthouse in D.C., there was a woman sitting beside me with a large oxygen tank and a mask over her mouth. She was really heavy, and she wore a purple flower dress. I sat beside her. I remember I noticed her oxygen tank and wondered what was wrong with her. Then I heard a knock on the glass, which was right behind me. The seating arrangement was like the chairs were facing the waiting area, but your back was to a glass wall that if you looked through, you could see the security guards checking people in through an x-ray machine. I looked up when I heard a knock. 3 knocks. Then I looked up, and so did the other woman with the oxygen tank. We looked up at the same time. The angel of death looked at me with eye contact, then looked directly at her. He stared for about 3 seconds at both of us, me first and then her. When he looked at her, she wheezed a big then she fell on the ground in front of her chair. People, adults, started running to her and they said, "Get those kids out of here." And I just kept saying, "You did not see that man scare her?" Then I looked down the long hallway. He walked down and only saw his long black coat that looks like what judges wear. A black hat, black cape or cloak, and black shoes from the back. He did not look back and his arms were swinging. When I ran to catch up with him, he was gone. The security said no one came in with all black on, and they insisted I was crazy and to take me home. I still remember how he looks. He was a medium complexion black guy that was medium build and was older looking. The woman was white. This is a true story, and I'm not just saying that because I want you guys to believe this. It's because it is true. Thank you for reading. This is only one example of an encounter I had in a house I lived in. My daughter was only about 6 months old, and my husband and I were living with his parents at the time. On one particular morning, he had left for work, and I decided to lay on the couch until my baby woke up. I left the door to the upstairs open as well as our bedroom door, so I could hear when she woke. I fell asleep on the couch. Shortly after I fell asleep, something woke me. As I opened my eyes and looked up, I saw what appeared to be someone wearing a black hooded robe, going towards the stairs. I watched the figure. I sat there frozen, turn and go upstairs. At this point, I was freaking out. My baby is up there. I got up and started running towards the stairs, and I yelled for my mother-in-law to help. She was sleeping in the room off of the dining room. When I got upstairs and went into the nursery, my baby was lying there, limp with her eyes rolling in the back of her head. I grabbed her and ran downstairs. She was lifeless. We put 7-Up soda in her bottle and forced it into her and left it for the hospital. By the time we reached the doctor, she was okay. No one could explain what had happened. When they looked at her at the hospital, they thought we were nuts. She was laughing and having a great time, getting all of the attention. So, what was that? Had I beaten the angel of death? Or was she in trouble and that spirit was warning me? Whatever it was, thank God I still have my daughter. A little after 8 p.m., I was in bed, exhausted and waiting for my husband to come back from the kitchen with snacks. I dozed off for a few seconds, and when I opened my eyes, I saw a hunched over figure carrying what looked like a walking stick. He was standing sideways, so I saw his left side only, but his hair was gray and mussed, and he was wearing a ratty, moldy-looking cloak around his shoulders and partially over his head. As I stared, he just faded away. It was really disturbing. I didn't know if it was a dream or what. My husband came back a few seconds later, and I didn't know what to do. Finally, I told him, and he joked that it was the angel of death. I thought he looked a little like the guy from Akalog, Jethro Tull cover, but not quite. The next morning, my daughter told me first thing to call Dad immediately. His older brother in Italy passed away that morning. I asked what time, his time and our time. I saw him about 4 hours before he passed. The strange thing is that even though there are 11 children, the only other sibling, another brother, passed away 28 years earlier, on the exact same day. I've not seen him again, but I've experienced visits by scent mostly, and he has visited a few times, mostly to tell the other siblings to call Italy and take care of his widow. I had spent time with this man, and he really liked me and even gave me a memento of his. I believe he somehow knew I could see things others couldn't. He knew I could, and did, carry out his message to my husband and for him to make sure his siblings stay in touch with her, too. Oh, and by the way, he did have a stick that he used to carry with him. Upon ever thinking of the paranormal, my initial feeling is fear. I'm not, maybe never will be, comfortable with my encounters with the supernatural. I've always been what you would call overly scared when it comes to the subject of ghosts, but that doesn't stop the supernatural from paying my frightened self many visits. For some odd reason, most of my encounters have been while being just in the midst of falling asleep, or they will wake me out of my sleep. For this reason, I've always tried to convince myself that they were just my imagination. I've come to cope with the fact that they have been happening more frequently. The past homes I've lived in have been older homes, so you would think that if I were having encounters, the history of the home would be to blame. But I now live in a newer home, and I'm recently being visited by a close friend of mine who passed away almost 2 years ago. My first encounter when I was about 13. I was lying in bed, almost asleep, when I heard what I thought was my little sister talking and playing in my room. I told her sternly, "Holly, get out of my room." But when the little voice and rummaging through my belongings in the corner didn't stop, I opened my eyes only to see that the little voice wasn't my sister's. It was a little girl whose face I couldn't really make out, being that she was a little ball of light. Some of her features were distinctive, but I could clearly tell what was happening. I jumped out of my bed and ran for dear life. My mother is a big fan of the supernatural and always says, "Elizabeth, you should try to talk to them if you see them. Ask them what they want." Is she crazy? My first experience made me run, much less strike up a conversation. We eventually moved into a much older home where I experienced a lot of lights turning on and off by themselves and the frequent sounds of someone walking up and down the hardwood stairs. But I grew used to it and never had any more visual experiences until recently. My closest friend, Morgan, passed away in a car accident almost 2 years ago at the young age of 18. I believe that she hasn't crossed over because she is confused. Her life was taken so quickly that I believe she is lost, and she is now visiting me. She has come to me 2 times in the past month, and I have a feeling that she's going to come again. Anytime I have an encounter, it scares the wits out of me. Again, this encounter came in the midst of falling asleep. I was actually having a dream about her, and I don't know if it was a noise that woke me up, but in my groggy state, I opened my eyes, and someone was standing in front of me. I know it was her, but couldn't make her out. I heard her talking to me, but it was very muffled. I was scared to death, of course, so I closed my eyes and tried to fall back asleep, blowing it off as my imagination, until I woke up. The same night, I was having yet another dream about her. I'm a very light sleeper, so any noise, touch, etc. will wake me up. While dreaming of her, I popped awake instantly while catching a chill and having something touch my back in the dead darkness of the night. I tried to scream, but nothing came out, so I hugged my infant son closer and went back to sleep. My way of dealing with my encounters is to be very still, if you call that dealing. I would like to not be so fearful of the supernatural, much less my best friend. Please help if you can. Guys, Phantom here. And I like saying it in that tone. Hey guys, Phantom here. It's fun. Hey guys, Phantom here. Say it with me. Hey guys, Phantom here. Hey guys, Phantom here. 1, 2, 3. Hey guys, Phantom here. Hey guys, Phantom here. Anyway, before I act ridiculously stupid like I just did a second ago further, I just want to let you guys know that I really appreciate your company. And as a result, your viewership has made me happy. Yeah, no, it has though. Anyway, if you like this video, of course, as usual, comment, like, subscribe, and share. Honestly, you could even share it if you didn't like it and just scoff at it and call it weird, you know? You can do whatever you want. It's your free will. And I even knew someone named Will, and he was kind of imprisoned by his mind, and yeah, he kind of ate tulips until the day he passed away. And then he woke up and he became resurrected, and I realized it was all a dream, and I fell asleep, and I woke up again, then I fell asleep again, and then I woke up again, and this stuff never existed. I'm lying. I don't have any friends. I'm just a wannabe lover of friends. Anyway, good night, guys, and love you, and hope you have a great day or night, or, you know, it's about time that I actually make sense one of these days.